Hi, good evening. Today is August 27th, Friday. We'll be changing the timing of our podcast to once a week, Fridays for now, as we're trying to do different things. So we'll keep you posted. It was quite an interesting week. Yesterday, the market sold off on the news of the attack at the Kabul airport, which was a very unfortunate and deadly event. Around 200 people dead and 15 US Marines are unfortunately dead, if my numbers are correct. So it's definitely a tragic story when they were about to come home and instead lost their lives. So ISIS claimed that or at least the US claims that it's an ISIS attack. But in Afghanistan, who really knows what's going on? Suicide bombers could be anybody, and for whatever any reasons, as the infighting is, I'm sure, going on in Taliban in Afghanistan, over the control of the country. And so the market didn't like that and sold off to test the 65 level, but that didn't last long, and the market has swiftly recovered today, especially. We were up around 50 points from the overnight lows as the market really liked Powell's speech. We not only regained all of the grounds lost yesterday, but finally closed above 4,500, a very nice and beautiful round number. And we traded as high as 4,510 on S&P 500 futures. The best summary of the Fed that I could give today is that it was hawkish on taper and dovish on rates, on hikes. And so Powell basically reiterated what he has said in the FOMC meeting minutes, that he was of the view, as the most participants, that if the economy evolved broadly as anticipated, it could be appropriate to start reducing the pace of asset purchases this year. But at the same time, he stated that this has nothing to do with hiking rates, that those two things are unrelated. And basically the market, I think, interpreted this as the Fed is not going to do much still. And as long as the rates are not increased, everything is fine in the market. At least that's for today. What happens Monday is a different story. Powell also highlighted that he really doesn't care about inflation. He said that the longer-term inflation expectations have moved much less than actual inflation or near-term expectations, suggesting that household businesses and market participants also believe that current high inflation readings are likely to prove transitory. Well, I don't know which universe he lives in, but I hope he's right, because the way I see it, it seems that those increases are not transitory, and mostly because of the labor market, which is also ironic because Powell in the same speech said that he's going to focus on labor markets a lot more than inflation, and he thinks that there is slack in the labor market, which anywhere I go, I see signs of bonuses, sign up. People can't find enough labor, especially in construction, can't get any bids even. People don't even want to come and give you quotes. It's not only the shortage of materials, it's the shortage of people to do the construction. And so at the same time, one of the surveys I've seen this week was that the number of notices to quit was at the highest level ever. So not only people can't get jobs, lots of people are quitting because they're getting better paid jobs. And yet somehow Powell thinks there's slack in the labor market. Okay, well, let's hope he's correct and the inflation is transitory. But
yeah, it's I think that like the Fed has put, people don't have fuse boxes anymore, but the expression used to be like putting pennies in the fuse box, like, whatever, the fuse would trip and before circuit breakers. And so they put a penny in there to, force the circuit to close,
right.
and maybe make, the wires in the house set on fire or something like that. But just to keep the power going, right? And that's kind of what they're doing, is they're taking all of these traditional and maybe the last time we saw it was in the 70s with William McChesney Martin, right? Who famously said that the purpose of the Fed is to take the punch bowl away before the party really gets going, but he didn't, right? He's very dovish, and inflation roared in the 70s for a number of reasons, but the Fed was very accommodative, and they always talked about tight labor markets and or slack labor markets and so on. They needed one of them to tighten up, and that was their primary concern. And it took a generation for that inflation mentality to be worked off, really, or at least 20 years. And now we're headed right back into it, where it becomes an inflation expectation. I think it's a very dangerous game that they're playing, because once these expectations get set,
Right.
it takes a lot of time and policy and so on to change that mindset. But it's becoming the mindset where, and of course, it's driving up asset prices across the board, and everything from stocks to cryptocurrency to art and on. Real estate, it's every single asset class is going up against cash as a result of this.
Exactly. And well, back to the markets today, not only S&P obviously was up, everything was up. Russell was up almost 3%, quite the move it had for the week. NASDAQ was up 1%. On the futures, everything, gold, silver, bonds, oil, copper, corn was up today. Part of that move was driven by the dollar. US dollar actually had a very negative move on Powell's speech. And it seems that the breakout that we had was a fake breakout on the dollar. And I would say that longer term, the US dollar is likely probably to move down even more.
Oh, here, just a few weeks ago, or just last week, people were talking about a potential breakout in the dollar,
Right.
and it sort of rejected that breakout was rejected, right? And now we now broke. And really, I think the key point is like this, maybe the 92 level. If it breaks below that, then it could be a lot more move down. I think that currencies, they tend to trade a little bit more on these technical considerations than maybe stocks do or crypto. But
right.
But I think it could be just a little bit further down, and it could be there's a lot of air down there, I think.
Also, let's look at the back to S&P 500 chart, maybe longer term, daily or weekly. We had today, I think, if I'm correct, it's hard to keep track, 11th all-time high in August, and it's 52nd all-time high for the year 2021. And we are on track, if the rate of all-time highs continues, we're on track to be the second or even the highest number of all-time highs since 1928. So, we've talked about a lot about how strong this bull market is. We did not have a 5% pullback for over 200 days. And at the same time, I could say that in 2017, we went for as long as 400 days or so without a 5% pullback. But if I'm not mistaken, in 2017, we were up around 20% during the whole year. The market was up 20%. Meanwhile, we're already up 20% year to date. So the rate of increase is a lot steeper than in 2017. So I doubt we're going to go another 200 days without 5% correction. Also, if we look at the year to date gains, we're up 40% since the low of 3,200, you could see it on the chart, made in September of last year. So 40% since that low. And the correction, interestingly enough, last year started in August, right at the end of the August, kind of same days we're in right now, and we had a 10% correction then. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to have 10% correction starting tomorrow, Monday or whatever. I'm just saying that comparatively speaking, we've had one of the strongest market rallies on record by any metric pretty much you could look at. And dare I say this is as good as it gets? Andy, what do you think?
Yeah, well, one thing that I think is interesting too to notice, I mean, we've talked about the relative underperformance of the Russell 2000, right? And it's more or less been in this sort of chop since whatever this is, February, really, where it topped out, and since then it's just been chopping around. And that further, I mean, this is a chart from a bespoke report, which I get their service, but the chart shows something similar, where it's part of the story of the rally was up until early February, and then to some extent in May even, that we saw this. It was the underperformance of the market cap weighted index against an equal weight index. So in other words, since May, we've had this overperformance of big caps, like like a handful of big cap stocks. And so the question is whether that will continue or not. We might have seen a bit of a reversal with Russell 2000 starting to outperform, dollar maybe weakening here. And if that's the case, then it could be maybe time for this chop to end it. But no, this shows the Russell 2000 down for the day. I think that's wrong. It was up big today. Right. So I think that was like a 1 day delay or something weird. But so it was up big today, like nearly
2% almost.
Right in line with the so it was up pretty nicely today. So that's the question, if it can if it can resume that leadership, such as what we saw before February, then the market could feel a little or be a little healthier than it's been, where it's been a highly concentrated rally really since February. But on the other hand, how long can the rally continue? That's the real question.
As also we keep getting more negative news about the Delta variant. What they say, third time is the charm. So now everybody's supposed to get the third shot. So I'm still a bit at a loss at the logic here. If the first two didn't work, why would the third one work? Unless they only work for a very limited period of times, and then you're supposed to get them every few months or so. Even Biden today is saying that he has discussed with Fauci that we should get shots every 5 months. And then, of course, he flip-flopped and said, well, no, we don't recommend that yet. But I hear lots of anecdotal evidence of people here in Florida who had 2 shots, and now they're getting COVID. And so now, of course, they're all rushing to get the third one because, like I said, third time is the charm. New data that comes up right now from Israel, actually, says that natural immunity is 13 times more effective than vaccines for Delta. Some other interpretation, I guess, of the same study said that it's 27 times more effective than the vaccine for all of the COVID. So I don't know whether it's 13, 27 or whatever, it's still double digits. Natural immunity is much more effective. So why are we then making people who had COVID do the shots? Not only we're skewing with the results by introducing this kind of another variable to the equation, and we also should not even give those people the shots because they're not needed. They already have immunity that's a lot bigger. And so why don't we check for that? If we believe the science, somebody who had COVID already has much better immunity. Why are we immunizing them, making them perhaps taking unnecessarily risk if we trust
and not to mention most of these when there's talk about the Delta variant, most of the people who report COVID symptoms and they go to the doctor or they test positive, they test positive with a PCR test, which is just detecting the these spike proteins or whatever, and they're not detecting the like the variant. I mean, that's a special test, and there is a test to find that, but most people that are reporting COVID symptoms and have a diagnosis and it's reported as a case and all that, they have no idea what the variant is.
Ironically, a few people I asked, they all claim that it's Delta because they claim that they are special, and so their test was sent somewhere far away and they were told it's a Delta virus. I mean, I don't know how much resources the US government has to test everybody for Delta, but we just assume that everybody who's got COVID now has Delta.
There is some testing. I'm not saying it's not happening. It's just in most cases,
right?
Unless unless there's a specific test that's done, then most people don't know, and there's no reason for the money to be spent to find that out, because they manage the symptoms through whatever rest and sleep and so on, instead of being in a hospital.
Right. And we don't even know that perhaps the issue is exactly because we're vaccinating people with natural immunity, that it somehow produces some sort of unexpected result. But, instead of investigating that, CDC is tweeting about using inclusive language and pronouns. So maybe if they focused on trying to figure out what actually science is behind the vaccination, natural immunity, etc., maybe we would have fewer problems. I mean, why is the person who had COVID cannot get a vaccine passport and be considered immune if they already had COVID? Why do they have to get a vaccine, try to elicit worse reaction? How is this even science? Nothing makes any sense any longer. And so I think maybe that's why Denmark basically decided to stop all of this madness altogether. And in Sweden, actually, they pretty much had very limited restrictions since the beginning. They relied on natural immunity, and as a result, they have 0 deaths. So now I'm looking at the country correlations and see the more the country gets the vaccine, Israel, the more COVID deaths they get, and the fewer countries get vaccines, whether it's Belarus or Sweden, the less COVID deaths they get. So I'm like, all right, correlation obviously is not causation, but is anybody studying this correlation to see if maybe it is causation? Instead of studying gender pronouns and whether we have 200 genders or whatever the latest number is.
Well, and the drive to get everyone vaccinated is still based on this idea where there's been no study on this that's a controlled study where there's any kind of confident statement about whether or not there is really any asymptomatic spread from asymptomatic people. In other words, that was from the very beginning, it was discussed as, well, there's a period of a few days before people show symptoms, and during that period they have a high viral load, and they're very they're this super spreader or whatever. And yet that was a hypothesis that was stated when people didn't know anything. It was okay to say it back then because there are a lot of diseases where that's true, like famously typhoid fever, right? Typhoid Mary going around spreading typhoid fever all over New York. But this isn't one of those types of diseases where there are carriers that don't themselves have many symptoms. There might be a case, some cases where people have very mild symptoms, but there's not evidence of
As a matter of fact, some studies actually said that people who are vaccinated have the same viral load as unvaccinated, and maybe even more, according to some studies. So it's actually the vaccinated people who are producing vaccine-resistant viruses and then unknowingly spreading it to unvaccinated people. So it's the vaccinated people that need to be locked up.
Yeah, it's and it's like the further we get into this, the more lunacy you hear. I mean, like as bad as some things are in the United States, like there's a case in Australia where in New South Wales where the authorities actually they killed the dogs that were
Yeah.
rescue dogs at a shelter so that people wouldn't travel to pick up the dogs. Now, I mean, that is, I mean, complete lunacy. I mean, people had whatever applied for this and they were saving these dogs, whatever, and they killed the dogs so that people wouldn't leave their home. And
to make matters worse, the childhood mortality is going up apparently there as well, because when a child has some sort of defects at birth, they're not allowed to travel to a different hospital or whatever because of COVID. And so now more children are dying. So we're saving grandma by killing the children, because really, like I keep saying, the risks are extremely low for the most of population, except for really people who are older because they have lots of other complications.
right, and it's like they're worried about masking children in schools when really, although most children's mouths aren't exactly clean, I mean, it might be the cleanest part of their body. I mean, the hands touching everything, and
Right.
that I put a mask on a
Please
kid
don't
that
give them
somehow
any ideas. Don't give them any ideas. They're gonna make children wear gloves next, or the full bodysuit soon enough. I see those videos where children are being marched in like zombies in school. It's really scary what kind of population we're growing. It seems like more like an obedience test by the day than any kind of actual science.
yeah, at least in the Soviet Union, people had some very dark humor, and but that seems not even to be you know, acceptable. Here you joke about this sort of thing and people wish for you to die or whatever. So
Right. And the doctors refusing to treat unvaccinated people. I'm like, since when is the doctor blaming the patient? I mean, I could easily start blaming people here, you know, if we're in a blame game. How about people who smoke? Let's refuse to treat every smoker for any disease because it increases the risk of various cancers. Let's charge them more for health insurance now. How
are
about
doctors not going to treat patients who come in with a injury in a car wreck because they didn't wear a seatbelt, or
exactly motorcycle injuries without a helmet?
right, they didn't wear a helmet, so well, they were irresponsible. How I can't treat them.
Right. Never mind if you are 20 or 30 and you're obese, you should not be treated. You should be locked up at the gym, no food for 2 weeks, and see if you know, lose some weight. If we're locking up people for COVID, let's just lock up people at the gym, especially young people who are severely obese. So, you know, it's a slippery slope, and we have entered this.
Yeah, so we live in this this strange world that's bifurcating, where on the one hand we have less and less freedom, and on the other hand you have, you know, markets racing ahead, this crazy rally, supposedly validating capitalism and economic freedom, and
Right.
so it seems like it's like you know, that like in our society, the idea of this like Hindenburg omen, you know, and markets where, you know, when the new highs and new lows, when they're diverging too much, then like something got to blow at some point. It seems like maybe there's a similar phenomenon in our society at large. I mean, like something's got to break here between these two extremes pulling against each other, right? And either the market's wrong or these policymakers are wrong, and one is going to correct against the other. It can't go on like this, right?
Right, but you know, just like in what 2008 bubble, everybody knew that the real estate prices are way higher, but nobody cared. And so everybody whoever was early by a year or two was way wiped out. So it seems to be similar situation today, where people know that something is not right in America, but as long as the Fed keeps rates low and the government keeps giving free money, the rally continues.
Really, a lot of funds, like the quant funds and the financial crisis, started blowing up in like August, September of 2007, right? And and the Bear Stearns episode was like in February of 2007, right? And so, but it wasn't like crude oil and a lot of other commodities didn't actually top out until June of 2008. So like the markets kept racing up, at least some markets kept racing up, even as the stock market had already topped out, and there were warning signs everywhere. And still crude was like $150 a barrel, like we were in this great economy, and it clearly wasn't true, right?
Yes, indeed. So let's talk about the real economy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about crypto.
Yeah.
The news of the week is that Cuba now recognizes Bitcoin.
Well, I don't know.
It's not like Bitcoin needs recognition by some government.
Yeah, it's well, El Salvador is there. I think it's coming in like another week or two, where they're officially declaring it legal tender. There's a date, and they've already installed all these Bitcoin ATMs and so on. And they're giving like every El Salvadoran a certain amount of Bitcoin. I forget, like $30 or something. But yeah, crypto has been performing really well in the last several days. And by performing well, I don't mean racing ahead. It's Bitcoin pullback. It had a really nice rally the previous week, and briefly went above 50,000, but is pulled back, but it's hung out right below that 50,000 level. And right now it's just below 49,000. And I think it could stay in this range right here. I think maybe get a bit above 50,000, but in my view, 50,000 is an important psychological number. But right above 50,000, maybe 51, 52, is where Bitcoin has a $1 trillion market cap. And I think that's important psychological resistance. And we did hang out above that level for several months earlier this year. So I think that eventually it will get above and stay above that level. But there might be a little bit of work to do in the near term. And it's a very similar case with Ethereum, where it's just sort of chopping around, but it's quite bullish right now. It's above this 3,200 level, which in my view was really the last significant resistance. That's not to say it's, the sky is blue and it's going to shoot up. I think it'll move along with Bitcoin, and it might even underperform Bitcoin a bit. This ratio sort of topped out a few weeks ago, and I think it might continue to slide a little bit. It's just where we are in the cycle. It's not, that one's better than the other one or anything like that. It's like looking at the performance of one stock against the other, and one stock is not always going to outperform the other, and that's what we're seeing here. Bitcoin's a little bit more the senior issue, and it might outperform a little bit because it's been underperforming for some time. But the real winner this last week, as it was the previous week, is Cardano, which is sort of a controversial coin, because it's a number 4 in market cap, but they don't have it's not Bitcoin, obviously, and it's not claiming to be the next Bitcoin, but it is claiming to be a better Ethereum, but it doesn't even have smart contracts, which have been in place in Ethereum since 2016. So they've had 5 years to work out all of the kinks, and there's still issues that are discovered here and there, but it's just being rolled out for Cardano.
An amazing rally.
Yeah, it's been an amazing rally when you consider that this got as low as like 3 cents in April of 2020, and now it's at $2.86. And I think though that the it was a little higher. It had gotten, if you go way back, like to 2018 or 2017, it was above $1, but that was all-time high, which was then broken back in, I guess, back in April, and it's mostly remained above that level since then, and it's because there have been a number of it's actually delivered on some of the promise that they made years ago. It's late, but they're actually delivering on smart contracts, and they've got the staking that's fully decentralized, and there have been some, they've been much better at actually hitting their goals. And so this is, there's a lot of attention around it. And so if something really goes wrong with this launch, then this price could drop pretty rapidly. But if not, then it could continue to perform well.
When is the launch again?
Well, the launch of smart contracts.
Right.
So the smart contracts will go live on September 12th. And so that's about 2 weeks away. And it's a little, like, one of the things is that they allow Solidity, which is the Ethereum smart contract language. So theoretically, at least, someone could take a popular app on Ethereum and move it over to Cardano without a lot of work. They wouldn't have to recode anything. They'd have to make it specific to Cardano. It's not just copying and pasting, but it's not that much effort. They've got 2 other languages that smart contracts can be written in too, but one for financial applications and another for I forget something else. But the idea is that these 3 smart contract languages will launch, and then theoretically, at least, there can be decentralized finance or some of these, or NFTs, some of these other things that have been very hot on Ethereum and Binance and some of these other platforms will all be available on Cardano. But they're so far behind.
Well, what's the market cap? Do you know what's the market cap comparison of Ethereum and Cardano? How much bigger Ethereum?
Well, I'll bring that up. The I don't want to say the wrong number. It might be like yesterday.
Yeah.
It was so 24 hours ago. But right now, Ethereum is at 383 billion. Cardano actually number 3, so it's ahead of Tether and Binance. It's 92 billion. So when you consider the fact that, like, there's trillions of dollars that are moving in transactions on Ethereum just this year alone, something like $2 trillion in transaction volume has happened. And that's part of what justifies this market cap of 383 billion. Whereas you compare it to Cardano, which is like 1/100th or 1/1000th of that. And probably 1/1000th, less than just a few billion maybe moving. And so I'm not saying that's like the ultimate determinant, but it's like, it just shows how that this market is a little bit, crypto markets sometimes tend to be a little pie in the sky about what the possibilities are, and less focused on what's actually being delivered, which is, by far and away, Ethereum has a ton of transaction volume, much more even than Bitcoin, and certainly more than Cardano. Bitcoin is a close second, but Cardano is so far behind Ethereum I mean, even Binance is well ahead of Cardano, and in terms of transaction volume. So it's
Interesting.
I hold some Cardano. So I'm saying that with that no, not just I'm being negative a little bit about its valuation. Despite the fact that I hold some, I hold it as a hedge. I don't hold it as my primary, where I think the value is, which is, in my view, it's Bitcoin and Ethereum, really. And there's some other things, some smaller ones to get excited about, but I think Cardano is more of a hedge. It's more of like, what if something blows up with Ethereum kind of hedge, and that's why it's worth holding. But it's got a long way to go in terms of development and building the community that has been built in the Bitcoin world and Ethereum. There's an enormous community, millions of people in each one of these that are working to further the application and usage and so on. And it's Cardano could get there, but it might take a few years to be generous.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see, and I think it'll be interesting to watch over the next few weeks as that approaches. The question is, as some people have posited, that it kind of sell the news phenomenon, that'll tank on the launch of smart contracts. But I'm not sure. It's sort of like that's too easy a prediction, I think. I think that there might be some maybe institutions that have hesitated to invest in a Cardano or do really fund development on it because of some of the risk around it, whereas they've preferenced Ethereum. And if a competitor launches successfully, then they might throw some dollars that way. So that's that may be the countervailing force if this launch goes off successfully. But anyway, I think it's interesting to see this. I think that's worth watching. I think that one of the to maybe touch on a couple other crypto examples. I think Coinbase and the other one that I like, the other stock that I like that plays exclusively in the crypto space, which is Galaxy Digital. This is Mike Novogratz's firm.
Mm-hmm.
These are trading at a pretty significant discount to where they were just and compared to in comparison to the underlying crypto. So I like looking at these ratios to Bitcoin. Like for Coinbase, you see this is the ratio of Coinbase to Bitcoin that, despite having bottomed out and starting to rally, it's rallied pretty significantly, about 20% off its low. It's still trading very near the bottom in terms of its ratio against Bitcoin, and then Galaxy Digital, pretty much the same thing. It's trading. It's really sold off against Bitcoin, which means Bitcoin is rallied back, but these haven't really. These are sort of in the doldrums. So I think there could be there's an opportunity here because these are well-run companies and they're diverse in the space. And if this, in fact, they may be better long-term investments than the crypto themselves, given their diversification across the sector. If you believe in the space itself, the technology, rather than just believing in the coins. So I see them as another way to play the space that might be because you're basically investing with some very savvy people that know the space, the ins and outs of the space, right? Coinbase is more transaction based. Galaxy Digital, you're buying a money management firm. But I think that they both, there might be some opportunity there, even despite the recent rally, and they're off their, let me see if I can find it again. They're off their lows, but they're, here we go. Yeah, they're off their lows, but they're still significantly down from where they were back in April and May. So it doesn't reflect the recent rally, and I think it doesn't reflect some of the recent, let's say, lack of hawkishness on the part of the Fed either. I would expect these to be doing really well in this environment, and they're just, it's more of like a risk, aversion maybe that's occurring.
That's it for me for today. Thank you very much, and we will see you all back Friday.